Common Ed with Jared and Ian. I mean, there's got to be a common sense approach to this. I mean, right?
Generation X has been quiet way too 15 seconds, velocity 2,700 feet per second, altitude 9. New knowledge we know.
Common Ed.
I want my MT.
Welcome to Common X with Jared and Ian. We have a special guest with us today, Graeson McGaha from Graeson McGaha Comedy. How you doing today, bud?
Dude, doing great. Thanks for having me. This is really fun. You guys got a pretty awesome podcast, man. So I appreciate you guys having me as a guest. Thank you so much, man. Truthfully, man.
Well,
thank you, sir.
Being here. Yeah, thanks for being here. So this is episode 7, right, Jared? How the hell are you doing today, Jared?
Yeah, it is. I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. I mean, you're in the car. I'm concerned.
I'm good.
Okay.
Scheduling error
yesterday, so I'm worried about you.
No, I had to pick up some. I'm filling up my tractor tires with was it RV antifreeze fluid, so I had to pick some up. 2 55-gallon drums. So
awesome. All right.
fluid.
Well, this is episode 7, Common X with Jared and Ian. Special guest Graeson McGaha from Graeson McGaha Comedy. And today we're talking about inflation. Does the CEO really need to make 280 times the average American worker, guys?
They think
He's
so.
got to make something. He's got to make something. I'm going to start that off. Where I'm going to put that out there. The CEO of the company, yes, has to make something. So before everybody jumps on us in the comments and calls us all lazy and entitled and blah, 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 clearly you guys have never ran a company. The CEO needs to make something.
Yeah.
But I've always been of the impression that the CEO should be the last one to get paid. Like
Definitely.
the CEO, yeah. You can only pay the CEO if there's profits to be made. That is, I mean, running a company, that should be the way that you look at it. I got to pay for inventory. I got to pay for be able to get this out, advertising X, Y, and Z, the people that are doing it, the equipment. And then once all that is done, whatever we have left, that's your paycheck. Like that's it. But I think we've gotten to the point now to where, I look at a lot of these major companies that are hiring that were built by grandpas. You know what I mean? Like somebody's great grandpa did this with 2 quarters and a hopes and a dream. And it was a feasible thing for grandpa to work at a factory, make enough money in his savings to be able to do it himself.
Right.
That is not what we're having now. And that's what I worry that changes for the future is like, how are we going to continue to grow when your average workers can't make the money to even try to go chase that American dream anymore?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, your workers are the economy, and the economy needs to be running. So that's, we kind of brought that up in the last episode. It was AI overlords or something, but we were talking about how, if you have a CEO that's basically AI, and you have a company that's AI, and only one person's getting paid, that you don't have anybody to buy your product. Eventually, if all companies are being ran by themselves by a computer, then what the heck do we do?
Exactly. I mean, and that's that Skynet Terminator getting too smart for its own good kind of AI right there, man.
Yeah.
I
think it points to a bigger issue too. I think it's not just CEOs. I think it's corporations in general, right? Like since they were ruled that a corporation is now a person, right? Like corporations, if you look at it and how they're a person, right? They're the definition of a psychopath, right? They care nothing about themselves. They care nothing about anybody else, right? It's just themselves and making the most money for shareholders. And, these companies are recording record profits. And I am always driven back to how much is enough? They're like, oh, you made $4 billion. Oh, sorry, that didn't meet what Wall Street said of $6 billion. So now your stock going to go down $1. I'm like, really? Like, how much money is enough? It seems to be endless, right? Like we just need to make more, 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 more.
Yeah. Why stop at 1 billion when you could have 1 trillion? I guess.
Right. And
Well,
it
and I
kind
think
of
that, yeah, go ahead.
it kind of points to all the layoffs we're seeing right now, right? Like tech company after tech company just laying off people and going, well, we made money, but we didn't make a lot. So let's lay off 1,500 people. And that, oh, look,
Right.
we instantly made another $150 million.
Hmm.
Sweet.
I think one of the things that is always so hard, especially when you're that worker bee, when you are the ground level who is just trying to put food on the table for your family, the blue collar guys that I know you guys are, and the people who listen to this podcast are. You're the guy who is the low man on the totem pole. And then when you hear about record profits and you hear about companies making billions of dollars, you're like, huh, like how it's not about when it's enough, it's where is that going? I know myself, I mean, I've worked for companies that will record record profits, but then like, man, none of our equipment works. And I can write PMs on this thing all day long, but you're telling me that the whole entire $1 billion industry that we have right here is held together with duct tape and zip ties, and we're all out of duct tape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
You know,
I think the other problem is that companies are allowed to go into so much debt. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, the company I just came from, Lumen, they refinanced their debt again, right? It's just that I wish I could do what corporations do, right? Like, oh,
mhm,
I have $1 billion in debt. I don't really want to pay that, so I'm going to refinance it and move it out for another 10 years,
exactly.
right? Oh, and then 10 years comes and goes, I don't really want to pay that. Let's move it out for another 10 years.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, like Grayson said, like it's fun to watch these companies kind of step over $10 to pick up a nickel,
Yep.
because everything's ran with duct tape and now you're out of duct tape.
Right.
But the things that they'll spend money on that they think are part of the cost saving initiative to get lean are actually ridiculous 9 times out of 10.
Mhm.
And not what the
Yeah.
company needs at all.
Right.
I
Yeah.
actually worked for a company to where we couldn't do bonuses, right? That was the thing. We couldn't do raises or bonuses. It was just not in the budget. Recorded record profits during the pandemic, not in the budget to do bonuses, not in the budget to do raises, but they spent 300 and some odd $1,000 to have a company come in and teach us about 401k investing and planning.
Yeah. The consulting companies.
Yeah,
Yep,
you
the
got to pay
consulting
for it.
company that came in and said, "You guys need a budget. So let's do this PowerPoint presentation about how to budget your money so that the money that you're making right now will go further."
Yeah.
And and then of course we had a company Christmas party to where, that there was that too. So it's like I really don't need to have a fish fry. I would really enjoy, just
Yeah,
to
how
be able
about
to
a couple
do
thousand
things.
dollars in my pocket or something instead of getting
Yeah,
drunk at Red Lobster on the company dime for
exactly.
sure.
Well, and that's a question that I'll bring up to you guys. I mean, with these companies making record profits, can a pay raise be disrespectful? Like, what if you're doing a raise? What do you expect for a raise? Because that's always one that I've gotten from corporate America, which is, so what? You guys are expecting $1, $2 every year. So at the you work for the company for 5, 10 years. Next thing you know, you're making 30. You're making 40, $50 an hour. Like it never caps. So
Right.
I ask you guys, can a pay raise be disrespectful? Because I did everything I could possibly do to do a raise. Did the attendance thing, did everything I needed to do, and I left the company over a quarter.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead, Ian, if you got something.
Yeah, no, I think he's right. I think, if a company reports record profits and you get a quarter jump an hour, that it's kind of disrespectful based on, how many employees that company has. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I kind of echo that and then speak to like it should track inflation, right? Like
Mhm.
if the cost of living goes up, then you should be paying your employees whatever that cost of living went up, because if you don't, they're going to jump ship to somebody else that will, right? And
Yeah.
so companies now are laying off more and more people, so it's turning back into an employer's market instead of an employee's market, right? So it's
Yeah.
getting harder to find jobs. So then they'll, start tightening the strings on the purse, right? Like we're not going to give out any bonuses, we're not going to give out any raise because we don't have to, because the talent pool is humongous. If you don't like it, go somewhere else, right? We'll hire somebody else, right? So I think if we keep pace with inflation, I think that works. But like you were saying, Grayson, I think transparency is the big thing here, right? Like, here's your
Mhm.
pay range for your job, right? Here's the
Yes.
upper, like we'll just say here's the lower, it's 100,000 a year. Here's the upper, it's 150, right? How long it takes you to get to that 150 is up to you, right? Based on your performance, based on how you work as an employee, what contributions you make to the company. But like the pandemic kind of showed us, inflation went through the roof all like
Oh,
pretty
absolutely. Yeah.
fast, right? Like price gouging, and the companies didn't back off, right? They didn't say, "Oh, well, we're going to charge $100 for a cheeseburger." Well, people are paying it. Well, the pandemic's over. I don't want to charge $50 for a cheeseburger anymore. People are still paying $100. Let's keep that
Right.
going.
They
Yeah.
need that cheeseburger. Right.
Right. So, that's an extreme example, but like McDonald's is recording record profits, right? Because they've jacked up all their menu prices. People are kind of doing a strike against McDonald's and not shopping there anymore because of their prices, because they are the highest priced fast food chain in America right now. So,
Exactly.
and for no reason, like the cost of beef didn't go up, the cost of, making buns didn't go up, lettuce, everything else. I mean, it went up a tad, right? Because, some genius in the government decided to flip flop gas prices and diesel prices, right?
Right.
Like, hey, let's make everything more expensive by just making it so diesel's now more expensive than gasoline. And that's how everything gets everywhere. So companies had to pass that on somewhere. And unfortunately, it came to the consumers.
Well,
Absolutely. And yeah. Go ahead,
I
Grayson.
think, yeah, I think the biggest thing that, when we really talk about inflation, the biggest thing that I would love to see, and this is not like a rally cry or anything like that, transparency. Like it
Oh,
goes back to
yes.
the idea. It goes back to the idea is how much does the CEO really need to make, and can he justify what they're making? But it's transparency behind it. Like why? Why are you
Right.
making this? Why is it costing me now $100 for a cheeseburger? Why am I your employee getting priced out of the market to where I can't even shop at the place I work? Like
Right.
there's no transparency behind these government regulations and these tax codes and how they're getting away with all of it. So all of us little worker bees are just continuing to go, hey, this kind of sucks. Like,
Yeah.
this is not cool. And what can we do to make it better? Because we got to work. Like, we all know that we got to work, but it's like there's no transparency that says, hey, the guy at the top is making far more than the guy at the bottom. And I'm not saying they need to make the same, but I'd
Right.
like to know if you can justify why I'm making this and you're making this, then I feel like there would be some level between here and here that both of us could find a happy median.
Yeah. Yeah. I've worked for quite a few corporations now, right? Really big ones. And, you have the CEO making 17, $18 million a year, right? And their lowest paid employees making 40,000, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big gap. And like if you look at over time, right, CEO pay versus regular Joe pay, right? CEO pay has gone up, I think 1,200% since
Yeah. It's
1970s,
ridiculous.
right? And
Yeah.
worker pay has gone up like 18%, maybe 20, right? So I think it's just the ultra rich stay ultra rich because they're ultra rich. Right? And, and the American dream is you too can be ultra rich. You just got to work really hard and have a good idea and blah 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 blah. Right? And I don't think that's honestly a reality for 98% of Americans. It's
Yeah,
just
I
a
think
I,
dream.
I
that
concur.
Right?
Yeah, and the reality is, yeah, there's no real cost of living adjustment, and there's no real transparency, like you guys have identified. I mean, we should be able to be realistic and be honest with each other. You know, when we sit down, I mean, you sit down for your one-on-one with your employer, it should just be honest because uh, we as the worker can walk away just as much as they can get rid of us, and they make the rules. It's their sandbox. But
Right.
yeah, transparency for sure. That should be key, I think. I agree with that.
I think transparency, and then we could have a whole nother show about the public education system and training us to
Oh
be
yeah.
little worker bees. Like
Yep.
we could have a series about JD Rockefeller and all the fun stuff in
Oh,
the public
yeah.
education system.
Yep.
But I think it's one of those things that, I mean, and this is something I go back to with blue collar America over and over again, is like those, you think of a middle class blue collar American family, more than likely going to have a little bit of religion in the home. You're going to go to church, you're going to do things like that. Dad's going to be a worker, mom might be stay at home, mom might be working too, but they have that work ethic because that is how they provide. So I feel like especially in the trades and especially in warehouse work and welding and things like that, it's almost exploited because you've been given this mindset of don't quit. You have those
Right.
company men mentality because, hey, dad and papa worked for this company for 20 years and he's got a gold Rolex and he's a company man. Company's taking care of papa. And then you look at how they've treated our parents, and then you look at how they're treating us now, and it's like, okay. So I feel like there's a lot more the exploitation of workers in the trades and in blue collar world because they know that you have that. I got to provide for my family. That's what a man's responsibility is to provide for his family. And it is one of those things. You almost are fighting against yourself because they know that you don't have anywhere else to go. I feel like when we talk about transparency, we definitely have to talk about the public education system, because how many of us have graduated, you're 18 years old, you graduate high school, college isn't really an option. You got to go to work. You don't have mom and
Right.
dad's money. You don't go get to take a 3-month respite and go and hike the Oregon Trail so that you can discover yourself. No, like
Right.
now it's time for you to go to work. And I feel like there's a level of the public education system that's still exploiting the middle class to that idea that, hey, this is just the way it is. You don't have enough
Right.
education to educate yourself to know that it could be better.
Right.
Or they're just living at home, right? Because they can't afford to live on their own.
Exactly, because they're not
The
making enough
cost of
money.
living. Right.
I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that too. I really
Yeah,
do.
definitely.
I do too, and I think it's changed a lot, especially in the Gen X and the millennial mindset. I think it's changed a lot of that. I've seen a lot of Gen Xers that now their kids are coming back into the house because they understand it too. They're like, hold on a
Yeah.
second. Like, I have followed the rules. I've done what you've told me to do,
Right.
but money's not money in the way it used to, mom and dad. Like,
Yeah.
now we're having to have, I can't afford to go and do. I've done what you've told me to do. I've gone and done the job and I've worked hard and I've saved money, but I'm saving a percentage of my paycheck and to try to put a down payment on a house like you guys told me to. And I'm like, man, this $10,000 or this $20,000 is there. I was reading in my area, I live in North Carolina, the average cost of home out in the North Carolina, like single family home, is anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000. Which means if
Crazy.
you were trying to do a 20% down payment like they tell you to do, we're looking at 80,000 maybe. I mean, I'm
Right.
not great at
60
the
to 80
math.
grand. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's saving 70 and 80 grand? Like, it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years to save that kind of money. So you're
Yeah,
going
I
to see
think-
a lot of those older, if not longer. You're
Yeah.
going to see a lot of those. You're going to see a lot of that family having to stay together because that's just what it's costing me. It's costing me what it used to cost to buy a house, just to put a down payment on a house. You're going to see a lot more people staying there because
Yeah.
some of these people aren't even making 80 grand a year.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's getting back to whoever's in charge, right, really doesn't want us to own anything, right? They want us to go back to renting, right? So, yeah, you can't afford a house. Oh, well, here's a giant subdivided building that you can, take and rent. And now who owns that, right? All the big banks own these giant, apartment buildings, apartment complexes where there could have been houses and people, living in those houses. You now have 100 families living in one location. So I think they're making it harder for people to own houses by driving up those prices. And, renting looks a little better, but like I look at rents around our place, around our city here in Western Washington or Eastern Washington, and I'm like, it's more than I pay for my house payment for a
Right.
exactly.
three-bedroom apartment. I'm like, who's gonna afford that? Right. So I think, if you look at like countries, actually most countries other than the US, like multi-generational people living in the same house was never a big deal. Like grandma used to live with you, and then, you'd have three generations living in the same house. And then I think we've seen some of that with a lot of immigrants coming into America, right? Like they still do that. And, you had four or five people in that family that had jobs that helped pay for everything. But in America, we've had it like one family, one house. You go to work, you make the money, you provide for your family, done, right? But I think that melting pot that America is and has become, we're starting to see that more. And with our kids going out there to try and be able to afford things, they're going to have to do the same thing, right? So us Gen Xers, like you said, we're going to see our kids probably living with us, because they can't afford it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like it's no shot to millennials or Gen Z or anybody coming up. It's where nobody's we can't afford it. The things that we
Yeah.
did when we were, and it's amazing how it's changed just in 20 years. The things that we did, that we were taught, that we went and did, you just can't do anymore. It's not feasible. And it's just not. You can go and make $30, $40 an hour. Go be a welder and make that kind of money. You're not, who's making that money to be able to put the down payment on? Who's doing that generational wealth? It is one of the things to where I hear a lot of people complain about the middle class, and I'm like, man, you're two paychecks away from being one or the other, and it's rough out here for everybody. And I think I don't know how to fix it is the biggest issue, and I think a lot of people are feeling very lost in that idea of like, all right, we're doing what you told us to do. Now what?
Right.
Yeah, you can't just get out of the house at 18 anymore. That
No.
was kind of what it was. It was like, hey, if you're 18, go be a man now or whatever. But that, you guys are right. The option's completely off the table. So now we're all fighting over the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, how to fix it, right? Like I have thoughts, right? Like the government is just too humongous. Like if you're following the politics right now, Trump's like, well, we'll hire Elon Musk to come in here and audit every single department and cut all the people. Honestly, like I'm not a huge Trump guy. I'm not a huge Kamala guy either. I think they're both boomers, right? Which don't represent me or my beliefs that I want to see in a president. But there are only two options, right?
All right.
So
Well, you get
I'm like, because we
one
have
of
a
the other.
two-party
Exactly.
system, right? So you
Yeah.
have a choice between dumb and dumber or smart and smarter, or I don't know, like corporate lackey and corporate lackey. I'm like, because at the same time, like our political system's paid for by companies, right? So they're not going to put anybody into power that's going to threaten what they control,
What they control,
right?
exactly.
So, like, I think there just needs to be a giant reset. Like one of the big things, they've been talking about right now is UBI, like universal basic income. Like with so many people laid off and unemployment only goes for so long, like, I've been laid off since last November, right? My unemployment ran out quite a while ago. I've been doing other things to try and make money, but universal basic income, they're talking like, well, we'll give people $1,000 a month. Like, well, what's that going to pay for? Like gas?
Like a social security on steroids or something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And then who's paying for it, right? All the people that are the taxpayers, not the rich people, not the
Right.
corporations, right? So I think there needs to be, honestly, the way you fix it is to do a flat tax. Like we've talked about it for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. And it's just 10% across the board. You know, if you make less than $150,000 a year, 10%. There's no tax returns, right? Oh, and you also have to be able to spend that money responsibly. So that comes to that transparency part of it, right?
Does
Like
Miller
you were
Lite
saying
count as
earlier, Grayson. Like, so if we're giving the government all this money, then we need to know exactly where it's going, right? Because over here in Washington, we gave them $650 million last year in marijuana taxes. And where did that money go?
yeah, the
That's
potholes
always
are
been my
bad.
biggest question with a lot of the tax stuff is like, where does the money go? I mean,
Right,
I've said it and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. Like right wing, left wing, it's the same bird. Like
right,
we've been through, I've been voting since I was 18. I've been through Republican presidents. I've been through Democrat presidents. I've not seen a lot of change
no,
in either. I've never seen times that were just super flourishing and everybody was good, and then it was like everything's great. This other company, this other corporation, this other Democrats came in and they ruined it, or Republicans came. I've never seen the change. It's the
right,
same bird. Like,
yeah,
regardless of who's in office, it's the same bird. When you have people that are elected officials and their position only pays them $400,000 a year, but yet somehow they are millionaires, that's where you start having the conversation of where's the money go? Why
right,
are we paying so much in taxes that we can't justify where the money's at? I
yeah,
mean, like I've often told people, would you still feel the same way about the government and taxes if you actually had to write the check out to them as if you were paying a bill? Like if
Right.
you were paying your Netflix subscription and you're like, hey man, I got to pay for Netflix. It's $15 a month, but man, they got some really good stuff on here. I'm going to pay it. So $15 a
right,
month. But Netflix said, hey, from here on out, no new programming, nothing else. What you have is what you have. There's going to be no new programming. In fact, we're actually going to take some of the programming away,
right.
and we're
And
going to
we're gonna
jack
add commercials.
and we're going to add commercials,
Right.
but and we're going to jack the price up.
Yeah.
Well, if I was writing that check, I'm like, man, fuck this. I'm canceling Netflix. This is stupid.
Yeah.
You know. So
Well, I
I
think
think, yeah. Go ahead.
I think we saw that right with cable companies, right? Remember back in the day, we all used to have Comcast or Time Warner or whoever else, right? Um, and you paid a monthly payment to the cable company to watch all your stuff. Everybody's like, well, it's getting really expensive. So let's break that up so everybody can now have their own channels, right? And Obama did that one. He's the one that, broke it up so these big companies, all the channels can now leave, and now we have subscription channels. So like I saw an ad on what was it? Amazon Prime yesterday, and it was during the Thursday night football game. And they're like, you now have access to 100 channels that you can pay for. I'm like, huh? How is that cheaper? Right? Like I was paying $50 a month for Comcast, and I was kind of angry about it because it seemed expensive. But now, if I add it up between Amazon, Netflix, Apple TV, Paramount Plus, blah 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 blah, I'm paying hundreds, right? And
Yeah.
wait, this is supposed to be cheaper. It's
And
not.
yeah, and bringing it back to the idea of that with taxes, it's like I don't think I think that we are all seeing the tax rates go up. We're all seeing things. Everybody is spending more and more money, but again, it's like, hey, the programming here kind of sucks. Like,
Yeah,
kind of tired of watching reruns now, and that's I think when you see things and you're trying to justify like things in the school, like where is the tax money going? There needs to be more transparency of what's happening, and that's I think one of the things that has let inflation get so out of hand is the accountability factor, the
yeah.
the
I was
the
just
the
gonna say
checks and
that.
balance system of
Yeah,
like the everyday average Joe who is paying their taxes on everything that they do. is now at that point to where, and I feel like it's definitely at that tipping point to where you're going to see a lot of people. I don't want to say bucking the system, but you're going to see a lot of people that are just over it, because I think
Yeah.
there is so many of us now that feel that way, especially in this, in this election. There's so many of us that are like, hold on a second, I don't want to be like you said, I don't want to be team here or team here. I want to be here. I want to be taken care of. It shouldn't have to be one extreme or the other. Like, I just want to work and pay my taxes, and I want to be left alone by the government. That's it.
Right.
Like, let me do my thing. But
Yeah.
if I'm
Right.
coming in and my schools aren't safe, and I'm coming in and the roads aren't done, and I'm coming in and we don't have, and I'm putting all this money into things that you say is supposed to be our infrastructure, but our infrastructure is not being taken care of, then I need to know where the money's at. Where's the 600 and some odd $billion in taxes that you guys are getting every year? What's that covering?
Yeah. Yeah. There needs
Well,
to be.
right now it's paying our debt. Right?
Yeah.
Why do we
Like,
have
I think-
$600 billion coming in and we're still in debt? That's another
Right.
question too.
Well, it's because we're in debt to the Federal Reserve, which, if people do the research, that's not a federal government institution. That's a private central bank,
Yeah.
right? Like, the Federal Reserve loans the government money, and then we have to pay it back as the taxpayers. And starting next year, we're going to get to the point where the interest on our debt we can't afford to pay, like just the interest alone
That's
as a
scary.
country. So then I'm like, so then what are you going to do, central bank?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? Oh, well, let's print more money,
Right.
because that works.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's really what it comes down to.
Right. So you just
And
made everything worth less.
yeah, exactly. And that's, when people talk about, raising raising the minimum wage and things like that, it does one of those things. It's like we're just making everything worth less by doing this.
Right.
You raise the minimum wage up to $20 an hour, but I'm already making $30 an hour. Then do I get an influx as well? Like,
Right.
if that goes up, if you guys are saying that the minimum wage is this and I was already making more than it, so are you going to raise me or not? Or do I not count? Like, those are all those questions that everybody feels like there's such an easy fix. But I think the really big thing that, it's just that money doesn't money anymore. We got to justify the
Right.
cost of why it costs what it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you give someone $20 an hour for minimum wage, now you just raised gas by $1. The iPhone that was $1,700 is now $2,500.
Exactly.
Yeah, it
Right.
finds a way to make itself up and stay messed up, for
Yeah.
sure.
It never
It's
evens
not a
out.
fix.
Yeah.
Definitely not a fix. And I think it's one of those things that, like, we've all seen it. And I don't think, that there's a way to fix it without that little bit of coming together. And that might be why everybody is so driving wedges politically on other issues, is because, man, if we could actually sit here and have conversations like the three of us are having, to where we don't all agree on everything, but we could sit and go,
Right.
hey, maybe we get these wheels turning together. That's 100% why everybody's going to be mad about something else instead.
Yeah. I mean, it goes again to the idea of the flat tax, right? So, like, you make $250,000 or less, 10%. You go 250 to $1 million, it's 20%. Up above that, 30%. And then corporations pay 30%. And there is no tax havens. There's no tax shelters. There's no getting out of anything, right? Like, because I think a lot of companies have figured out all the loopholes, right, in the tax code system that's 650,000 pages long and takes
Yeah.
6 million people to run the IRS. I'm like, that's ridiculous, right? Like,
Exactly.
if you just make it a flat tax, nobody gets any money back, because you're actually going to pay less with a flat
Right.
tax, right? And we'll have a surplus of money that the government can now use to pay for services, right? And
Yeah.
pay for education and pay for healthcare and, take care of people, which was, I'm pretty sure, the idea that the founding fathers had in the first place.
Right.
Oh,
They were-
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the the whole thing has gotten so. Sorry, refilling coffee. The whole thing has
problem.
gotten so far from where we started. You know, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about either, is like, we're still pretty new at this. When it comes to global leaders, we're still kind of new to this. You know, we're still learning, but I think we got to get back to the idea that, like, you know, it's a great country. We love freedom. Hey, we're pretty good at it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's got to be good for everybody. It can't just be good for a select few.
Right.
I don't think the founding fathers had that in mind. That is like, hey, we're going to take care of the people who signed this piece of paper. But that's it. You know,
Right.
We got to get back to that idea that you can make that American dream happen.
Well, and I think they saw a lot of that coming from England, right? And the kings and central banking, they wanted to get away from that. And one of the big things was politicians weren't paid for, right? Like, it was a service. And my brother on our last episode kind of brought up this interesting idea, and he's like, what if being like a Republic or a House rep or a senator was like jury duty?
Right. Like you had to.
Everybody has to serve, right? You don't get out of it. I'm sure there would be like special circumstances, just like there is with jury duty, right? Because you don't want, you know, some people running anything, but like, I don't know, your feral wife, right? No, just kidding.
Y'all don't want her on any jury.
Right.
And I tell you what, though, I would sign her up to run the country real quick. Like, it would get done quick. All the stuff we're talking about, you put Mrs. McGaha Comedy in charge, it'll be fixed before lunch, because ain't nobody going to eat until this gets done.
Right. And I think if you do something like that, then, right, you make it so corporations can't really afford to pay all these different people all the time, right? Because there's a huge revolving door in our government right now. So people that, you know, are House reps, senators, whatever, they get paid by these big companies to pass laws that they want, right? That puts more money into their pockets. And then they're like, well, we can only give you so much of a donation, but when you get out of office, you can be on our board.
And that's something that definitely has to start being, you know, that's something that, again, it goes back to that transparency of like, you know, term limits need to be something that needs to get voted on by the people, and it needs to, like, that needs to be a thing. The idea of career politicians is ridiculous. Like, politician is not meant to be a job, not a career, at least, you know,
right?
To the point to where, okay, well, now as congressman, and then I'm going to go Senate. Maybe I'll run for governor. And it's all. It's very incestuous and very, very back and forth. Like, I didn't realize that, like, you know, you could be a congressman for this district, but you didn't get voted in for this district. So, hey, but you own property over here, so you go and run in this district next time because you're not going to win this. There's a lot of it that it goes back to that transparency of what are we teaching our kids at school? Because so many of us as grown-ups now, we're grown-ups and we don't know how it works. You can self-educate all you want to, and that's great. I tell people all the time, look, education should not stop the moment you stop going to school. Learn you something. Maybe make sure that you're learning you something from a solid source, because I love the people who want to come in comments and tell you that they learned something and they heard something, and I'm like, where'd you read that one? You know, Facebook. Yeah, Facebook. I heard it from my brother's cousin's sister's dog.
Right.
So it's got to be true.
Right. From an AI that wrote it.
Yes.
Right.
It's got to be true.
Yeah.
They got weather balloons in the sky that are controlling the weather. They're dropping these little balls out there, and they come out with their gas mask and they tell you to vote Democrat. That's what happens.
Right.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound crazy at all, but you know, then you look at it, you know, I did tell people the other day, I was like, y'all might want to start listening to some of your conspiracy theory friends, because a couple of them hadn't gotten anything wrong yet. So,
right.
Right.
Well, I like the idea of Mrs. McGaha Comedy taking someone to the tree to get their own switch.
Oh yeah. She would definitely, she'd fix all of Congress with a flip-flop real quick, you know. That's it. Don't get her day drinking. You get her day drinking, it's just going to get done real quick.
Right.
gonna be scary. That woman
That's
there is
awesome.
there, but I feel like there's, that goes back to the conscious part and the having a conscience and doing the right thing because it's the right damn thing to do. And
Right.
like you said at the beginning of the episode, how much is enough?
Yeah.
Like, all right, we have got way beyond generational wealth. Your kids, your grandkids, there are CEOs of companies who entire family should be taken care of. Like
Right.
everything should be taken care of.
Right.
How much is enough? How much money do we possibly need to take in? You guys are good. You're good. And we're not dealing with real currency. We're dealing with fake money that just has extra zeros, and you have money that is not a feasible amount of money to actually grasp and hold. You can't go to the bank and be like, I need $1 trillion out.
Right.
Can you get, like, nobody has a Scrooge McDuck kind of style, room in their house that they're diving into just gold
Right.
doubloons
Swimming through
and
the
swimming
coins.
around.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So it's one of those things for me that I think government wise, and when it comes down to the idea of all of this feasible things, that's why they don't want you renting. That's why they want you renting, not owning, because you
Right.
own a house. Oh no,
Right.
but you
You
don't
have an
really own
asset.
it. But you have an asset. I have something.
Right.
I have a
Yep.
feasible asset that I can trade this good for, trade this for something else. And that's what's noticeably lacking. And the accountability is noticeably lacking. And I think people's concept of wealth has always been so jaded. I mean, growing up, I really thought rich people were like Scrooge McDuck. They just they had all the, they had all this money.
Right.
And you come to realize that, like, it's not everything, because you can't buy the things with it. If you can't buy the things with it, then it's not worth it. You can have a great job, but if you can't afford to buy X, Y, and Z with it, then what are you going to do? Like, it's all those value things that don't get taught at that base level of, like, why can I tell you that, the Pythagorean theorem, and why can I tell you y equals mx plus b, and I can graduate and tell you that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but I'm 18 years old, I'm filing my taxes for the first time, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you get these, you know all of these things, all of these things, but you know nothing about everything, and everything about nothing. And I think it really, if we're going to take a strong look at how to fix the mess that we are in, we have to start taking a strong look at public education and what we are teaching children. Are they graduating with the idea that they can actually be functioning members of society? Because that's the biggest issue that I think all of us, elder millennials, Gen X parents, all of us come into it, and we're all still trying to figure it out ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue with, how do you fix inflation? How do you fix all of it? You got to start educating people on it, or else it's not ever gonna go anywhere.
Yeah.
You're gonna continue to have a group of people that are always getting taken advantage of, that are just making enough to stay above broke because they don't know any better. They've been systematically programmed to the idea that, hey, you get out of school, you go to work, you take a job. Hey, that's the best company to work for in this in this town. People don't know how to promote themselves. People don't know how to make the money that they need to be making to do better things. And you kind of get brainwashed into the idea that it's just, this is who I am. This is just how much I'm going to make, and this is it.
Yeah. This is what my life is supposed to be. This is what it amounts to.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so I think, social media platforms actually have kind of become the education. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, we're not opening books anymore. We're reading feeds. We're, reading posts, and, now we've got groups with left-handed and right-handed t-shirts, arguing over it, kind of sucks. I absolutely agree with you, Grayson. I think we need to get back to, continuing education, because you're right. When you graduate high school, it doesn't end. And if it does, then that's exactly what we're talking about. We're stuck in that same little wagon wheel, aren't we? Yeah, for sure.
I think social media definitely has changed. I mean, I think social media has made self-education a lot easier, but it's also muddied the waters a little bit. If that's if that's a fair enough way to kind of dance around that question. The information is there. The acquirement of that information is still the issue. Like, where do you go get it? You know, when we were kids and you wanted to go learn something, you went to the library. That's where the knowledge was kept.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and you went to the library and you picked out your encyclopedia and you read everything you possibly could on this subject. I think now with social media, you find a lot more like-minded people. You find people who think the same way, and it's easier to educate as much, but I think it's much harder to understand what information is actually accurate.
Right.
It just makes it a lot harder with that self-education. I mean, be curious is always a big thing, but when you start going into these groups, it goes back to my dad's sister's cousin's aunt is the one. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia and read it and you're like, oh, hold on a second, that's completely wrong. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I
the
love that
idea
people.
of
Yeah.
fact checking is become the big, you know, it's become a hot topic, but fact check, but you kind of want to know the truth, because that's the biggest issue that we've really started facing, is that it used to be you have an opinion, you could be right and wrong. Now it's your opinion versus facts, and that's where we have an issue.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 1,000% with that. You know, and I love that people, you know, I go to your TikToks, dude. I love them. You know, they're hilarious, man. It's like part of my day. I get up, I'm like, what's Grayson got going on today? Or see Jared's feed, or I like that people, you know, watch our show. But it isn't the gospel. It isn't the gospel for sure. I mean, it's
Yeah.
opinion versus fact, just like you said. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've gotten away from a single source of truth, right? So
Mhm.
like you said, depending on who you're hanging with, right? Like if you're a righty or a lefty, if you're always hanging with the righties, you're going to listen to what they say. And I think, like Grayson was saying, if we go back to education system and teach kids, I don't know, even just being able to have a debate with each other, right? Like being able to see somebody else's point of view and see that there is another side to every story. It's not just
Right.
what
And
you
not get
think
pissed
and
off
what
about it.
somebody told
Yeah.
you, right? It's like, right, and that's kind of the reason we had this podcast, is like we're seeing such polarization in our country, and it's leading us just down the wrong path. And if we get back to that center, right, and see
Hmm.
people for both sides or every other side, like there wasn't an LGBTQ problem until there was a problem because somebody wanted to make it a problem, right? Like there wasn't, especially with Gen X, like I had black friends and people of different color, and it wasn't a big deal, right? But now it is. Now we got to make sure
Yeah.
that we have this many black people and this many, and I'll probably get cancel culture for saying all this, but whatever. Like it's like, we got to have this many people here and this many people here and that many people here, and so everybody has fairness, right? Everybody gets a first play. Everybody's a winner, right? Like
Right.
that wasn't when we were
And
kids.
I've never had an issue with the everybody's a winner part of it. I just want everybody to get a fair game. That's always been the issue that I think we've kind of had. Not look, I just want everybody to get a fair shot to play the game. That's it.
Right.
And I think when we talk about corporate America, that's where the biggest issue is it's like, hey, I understand that I might be able to work better than this person. So I deserve to make a little bit more because I work harder than Ian does. Like, it should not be a blanket statement of all employees make this much money. Like,
Right.
I want to make more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Everybody should get a fair play at the game. That's the biggest thing. I mean, it's not everybody wins or everybody loses. It shouldn't be about that. It should be, hey, it's just across the board. Let's make it to where it doesn't matter if you started here and now you're here, or you started here and now you're here. We're all just trying to get to the same goal. I feel like that with the economy stuff, that's the biggest issue. And it goes back to me for education. Like it has to go back to that idea that you know what I know and I know what you know, so we're good. Like,
Right.
Right.
If we're teaching our kids a standardized, like, hey, this is what you're supposed to know, now we've all started. At least we know that everybody has the same concept of it, but it does. It feels like some sort of like gatekeeping, gaslighting when it comes to money and how to make money and how to be a grown up after it, because it's like, well, these people here, they've got a different tax bracket here, and they make it blanket, make it easy enough for everybody to understand X, Y, and Z. That's it.
Right.
Like, I'm going to show you this. Now you know it, X, Y, and Z. If you need help with it, we'll find the help. So it's, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where it is the great divide, because the information's out there. It's just hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been incredible discussion, guys. I love it. Thanks for joining us on episode 7 of Common X with Jared and Ian. It's been awesome. Graeson McGaha Comedy, thank you for being here. Graeson McGaha, check him
Yes,
out on
thank you, sir.
TikTok.
Yeah,
all
absolutely,
social
guys.
media platforms. He's funnier than hell. My man, thanks for being here. And thanks as always,
Absolutely,
Jared.
guys.
Thanks for hosting this with me there too, buddy.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. I really do. Thank you guys for doing this. I mean, again, we talk about social media making it easier and harder at the same time. I mean, this is one of those things. If you guys can just open people's ideas to thinking, that's why I love podcasts, man. I mean, you don't have to agree with everything I say. You don't have to not agree with me either. It's, hey, man, let's just think about this and then maybe do something, about it. That's the biggest thing, guys. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Hey, thanks for being here. And thanks for joining us, guys. This has been Common X with Jared and Ian.
Common X with Jared and Ian. I mean, there's got to be a common sense approach to this. I mean, right?
Tear down this flag.
1 minute 15 seconds, velocity 2700 feet.